I never thought the house I built with my own hands, the house where I once lifted my little boy onto my shoulders so he could take his first steps, would become the place where that same boy would stare straight into my eyes and scream, "Get out, old man. This is my house now." It happened on Christmas night, right at the dinner table where for decades I carved roast chicken for him with the same pair of hands that once held him steady while he learned to walk. My son Ryan Morrison looked at me as if I were something rotting on his doorstep. Behind him, his wife Samantha crossed her arms wearing a stiff, triumphant smile, the kind of smile that told me this wasn't an outburst. This was a plan. I didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't even lift a hand in defense. I simply stood there staring at the boy I raised breath by breath, bolt by bolt, sacrifice by sacrifice, the same child who once clung to my neck in the back seat of my 1967 Mustang, laughing as the wind whipped through the windows. That little boy was gone, and in his place stood a man who believed I had outlived my usefulness. What Ryan didn't know was this: behind the mask of an old mechanic with oil on his hands, I still carried the remnants of a legacy far deeper than he ever understood, and more importantly, I still had people who had once promised my late wife Grace that they would look after me until the very end. Before I continue, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We share real stories like this every day. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? My name is Jack Morrison, 68. For decades, I ran Morrison Classic Motors, the vintage restoration garage that Grace and I built from nothing. After she passed in 2014, that garage became the last piece of her I could hold on to. I poured every hour, every dollar, every part of myself into raising Ryan. Taught him how to tighten bolts until they sang. Taught him how to hear an engine's heartbeat before touching the key. Taught him how to smell the difference between good oil and cheap oil. I thought he'd carry the Morrison legacy. I thought he'd honor what Grace and I created. I was wrong. So wrong it still carves itself into my ribs when I breathe. I didn't notice when Samantha slipped into his life quiet as a shadow, cold as a blade, wrapping her influence around him like a vine choking an oak. I didn't notice until it was too late. And I had no idea that on Christmas night 2023, the night I quietly walked away from my own home, a black Cadillac from the past would be waiting for me at the gate, ready to pull me into a chain of secrets darker than anything I imagined. Nashville, Tennessee, December 25th, 2023, 6:45 p.m. I remember the cold that night, not the cold of winter wind, but the cold of a home drained of love. The house I built plank by plank suddenly felt like someone else's property, like I was trespassing in my own life. I placed the Christmas chicken in the center of the table. Emily, my 12-year-old granddaughter, folded napkins, carefully humming carols off key. She still believed in warmth, in family, in Christmas. Poor girl had no idea what was about to happen. Then the doorbell rang. Ryan and Samantha walked in. Ryan wore a forced smile, the kind you wear to a funeral. Samantha didn't even pretend. Her face was sharp as new steel. Her eyes scanned every corner of my house like she was calculating resale value. They didn't bring gifts. They brought documents. Dad, Ryan said, voice tight, "We need you to sign these tax papers. Just routine. Nothing major." I looked down. Small print. Blank fields. Pages without titles. Poison disguised as paperwork. "Walk me through it," I said quietly. Samantha stepped between us. "You don't understand modern business, Jack. Just sign. Ryan will handle everything." That sentence didn't feel like a slap. It felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. I set the pen down. "When paperwork isn't clear," I said, "you don't sign it. That's the rule of a garage. And the rule of life." Ryan's jaw tightened. Samantha's eyes narrowed. I could practically hear the gears of their plan grinding out of place. "Dad." "You always assume the worst," Ryan snapped. "Do you know what we're dealing with right now?" I didn't answer, because for the first time I noticed something I had been ignoring for years. The fear in his eyes was not his own. Samantha stepped closer, voice sharp. "If you don't sign, we could be penalized. This house might even be reviewed for ownership." I cut her off. "This house belongs to me and Grace," I said, calm and steady. "I'm not signing anything, just one sentence." And everything detonated. Ryan slammed his chair back so hard it ricocheted off the floor. His face twisted red. Then he screamed, "Get out, old man! This is my house now!" Emily gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. and she ran down the hallway crying. Christmas shattered behind her like broken glass. I didn't yell back, didn't even breathe heavily. I simply stood, slipped off the cooking gloves Grace bought me a decade ago, and set them on the table. A quiet period at the end of a sentence I never wanted to write. Then I walked toward the door. And outside, I expected darkness, but I found headlights. Warm golden light spilled across the driveway. A 1965 Cadillac Fleetwood, black paint deep as midnight, chrome so polished it reflected the moon, white wall tires glowing like theater lights. The rear door opened. A woman stepped out, tall, composed hair, tied back, gray coat, trailing behind her like smoke. Eleanor Brooks, Grace's old friend, the woman who helped us restore our Mustang in 1987, a woman who vanished into the business world and rose higher than I ever knew. CEO of Heritage Restorations LLC, one of the largest restoration companies in the South. She didn't look surprised. She didn't look curious. She looked ready. "Get in the car, Jack," she said softly. "Don't let them see you fall." I froze. How did she know? Why was she here? What did this mean? Behind me, the door cracked open. Ryan stood there, face pale, breath short. Not from guilt, but from realization. The old man he thought he owned, the burden he thought he could erase, was being picked up by a woman whose name carried weight in circles he didn't even know existed. A man he had dismissed, had connections he never imagined. His expression fractured anger, confusion, disbelief, all fighting to stay on his face at once. And in that moment, for the first time in years, he understood one thing: I was not worthless. I had simply never needed to show him how powerful I truly was. I placed my hand on the chrome handle. The Cadillac's door shut behind me with a soft, decisive click. And with that sound, a chapter of my life ended, and a far darker, far colder one began. That Christmas night, the black Cadillac carried me out of Nashville the same way a man is carried out of the life he no longer belongs to. The streetlights slipped behind us one by one, and I sank into a kind of emptiness so deep that even the pain went quiet. The suburban roads stretching toward Franklin slid past the windows like old film reels melting into the dark. Inside the warm cabin light, Eleanor watched me through the rearview mirror. "Jack," she murmured, "do you want to talk about it?" I didn't answer. Some wounds break you if you speak them too soon. The 1965 Cadillac purred so softly I could hear my own heartbeat. Eleanor turned the heater up just a touch. The scent of worn leather drifted through the car, the exact scent of the years when Grace and I lived poor but hopeful. "Do you remember?" Eleanor asked gently. "Back in 1982, the three of us fixing that old Chevelle SS in that tiny garage on Charlotte Pike." A tired smile crossed my face. "I remember. The garage door didn't even close back then." Eleanor chuckled. "And you told me a beautiful car doesn't need a beautiful shop, just clean hands and an honest heart." I stared out the window. Back then I was young, strong, simple, foolish enough to believe that if you worked hard and stayed good, life would return the favor. Grace was still alive. She used to stand beside me with her hair tied up, smiling. "You fix cars the way some men fix souls." Eleanor at that time was a fierce girl with big dreams and bigger talent, and she lived up to every inch of it. She left Nashville, built Heritage Restorations, from a dusty corner shop into a southern empire. And me? I stayed. I chose family. I chose Grace. I chose Ryan. I didn't know where those choices would eventually drag me. Eleanor pulled the Cadillac onto the side of the road, turning to me with eyes that seemed to touch an old bruise. "I didn't come to Grace's funeral," she said softly. I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Everyone grieves in their own way. You don't owe me anything." But the truth was, after Grace died in 2014, I was like an engine with no spark left. The laughter disappeared from the house. The garage turned cold, and Ryan was in his early 30s, too young to understand how cruel the world becomes when it smells weakness. And Samantha, she slipped into our lives like a winter draft, always gentle, always helpful, always so very convenient. "Dad signed this, the hospital needs it. Dad, this one helps us handle the insurance faster." And I signed, because I was hurting, because I thought Grace would want peace, because I believed if I held the family tight enough, it wouldn't fall apart. But pain makes fools of us all. The Cadillac merged onto the highway. Nashville's skyline shrank in the distance. Eleanor looked at me again, her tone shifting quiet but sharp. "Jack, I didn't come tonight just to pick you up. I came because you need to know something." I lifted my head. Something in her eyes made my heartbeat stutter. "Morrison Auto Group is going public in June." I froze. Going public. The company I built on loan money and sleepless nights. The business carrying my family name, the name I once handed to Ryan like a blessing. "I don't have anything to do with that company anymore," I said. "That," Eleanor said, "is the problem." She took a slow breath. "Your name is still listed on the original shareholder documents, and someone is trying to erase it." My chest tightened. Eleanor never exaggerates, never lies, never says anything without reason. I forced out the only word that mattered. "Who?" She turned off the main road into a dim stretch of woods, a place where no headlights would follow. "Samantha." Eleanor reached for her leather folder and pulled out a stack of crisp documents. "I obtained these from a source inside the company," she said. "There's a supplemental ownership form, a document used to adjust founding shareholders. If approved, it permanently removes your name from the Morrison legacy." My hands felt suddenly heavy as I lifted the paper. The signature looked like mine, too much like mine, but I had never seen this form in my life. Jack, Eleanor said quietly, that signature was made with a vector overlay. "It's forged." I sat in silence. Deep inside me, a door I had kept shut for a decade began to shake, so my voice rasped. "I've been erased from my own family for years already." Eleanor placed a hand on the folder. "No, not yet." I came to stop it. The moment she said it, my mind was ripped backward to 2014. Grace on the hospital bed, so weak she could barely breathe. The doctor said not to expect much time. Samantha walked in with a stack of papers, sugar in her voice. "Dad, sign these. They're just medical forms." I signed. I didn't double-check. I didn't ask. There was no one beside me to warn me. And the truth, the real medical POA was harmless. But the financial durable POA, the one that gave her full control over my assets, my house, my shares, Samantha forged that herself. Scanned my signature, cleaned it, overlaid it, replicated it, then submitted it electronically. The hospital never verified it. They were too overwhelmed. And with that, I handed Samantha the master key to everything. My home, my assets, my shares, my garage, my life. And I handed it to her because I was trying to save Grace. That signature born from love became the knife pressed against my throat for an entire decade. The Cadillac rolled under the soft glow of a streetlight near Exit 17 in Franklin, close to Heritage Restorations. I sat perfectly still, hands clasped so tight the knuckles turned white. My heart felt like metal being beaten with a hammer. Eleanor placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "Jack, you weren't betrayed tonight. You were betrayed 10 years ago." I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw Grace, saw the years I trusted the wrong people, and saw the bitter truth. The signature I gave out of love had become the very thing used to destroy me. When I opened my eyes for the first time in many years, I could feel an engine coming alive inside my chest, slow, deep, but real. A soft ignition, then a low, steady rumble. This fight, I wasn't afraid to start it anymore. There are truths that don't just hurt when you touch them. They change the very shape of your life, like a car drifting off the road, sliding into a dark ditch before you even realize you've lost control. March of 2024 was when I finally understood something brutal. I wasn't betrayed on Christmas night. I had been betrayed. Years before that. Back when I still believed I was a lucky man because I had a family to protect. And the first person who helped me see the whole picture was Mark Weston. Mark Weston, the man who doesn't sugarcoat betrayal. Eleanor took me to Mark's office, a small but perfectly organized room inside a red brick building near Franklin Square. Mark was in his early 50s, Tall gray hair combed back and eyes sharp in the way only men who've seen too much in the legal world can have. He shook my hand firmly. Jack Eleanor told me everything. I'll be direct. If you've been conned, I'll find out. No comforting lies, no empty promises, just the blunt honesty a betrayed man like me needed. He opened his laptop and pulled up a file. Here's the first thing I found, Mark said. Your loan. I frowned. I didn't take any loan. Mark turned the screen toward me. A $250,000 mortgage loan issued in 2019 under my name. Owner, Jack Morrison. Collateral, my house. It felt like someone reached inside my chest and squeezed until I couldn't breathe. I never signed anything like that. I know, Mark replied. That's why I kept digging. He flipped to the next page. This loan was validated using a document called a home improvement authorization. It lets the borrower use the house as collateral for renovation funds. But I stared at the screen. I never renovated my house in 2019. Mark pushed his glasses up. Look at the signature, Jack. It's yours, but not your handwriting. My stomach tightened. This was made using a vector overlay signature. Very clean, very precise. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. My name, my signature sat there accusing me, but I knew I had never touched that paper. A faint sound clicked in my mind like a loose bolt rattling before the engine finally starts to fall apart. The lowball appraisal and the unmistakable fingerprints of Samantha Mark pulled up another document. And then there's this. Someone requested a low-value appraisal on your home, 60% of its actual value. He opened an email. Sender S. Morrison, a Morrison Auto Group internal address. It didn't take a genius to see who that was. Samantha, I whispered. Mark nodded. If the house is undervalued, the loan becomes easier to approve. The bank thought you were renovating. Meanwhile, your daughter-in-law took advantage. I wondered, did Ryan know? Or did she use his access and his fear to manipulate everything? Did he look away just to keep the peace? It didn't matter. Pain doesn't ask for context. Mark wasn't done. He opened a yellow folder. This is what worries me most. He slid a printed photo across the table. Hospital security footage from 2014. Grainy, blurry, old, but clear enough. A woman bent slightly forward carrying a green medical file. A woman whose silhouette I knew too well. I stared for several seconds. It's Samantha. Mark nodded. She took Grace's medical file right after you signed the medical POA. 2 weeks later, a financial durable POA, a fake one, was uploaded to the system. Same day, same signature. Your signature. I leaned back in the chair. The room tilted. In 2014, when I was at my weakest, when Grace was dying, when my world was collapsing, Samantha drove the first knife in. Slow, silent, surgical. Mark continued. From that moment on, she had full financial power. Every loan, every ownership change, every contract could be filed under your forged signature. I had no more words left. There was nothing left to ask. Mark watched me for a long moment as if preparing to deliver the hardest blow. Jack, he said quietly, let me ask you something. Why didn't you review those documents back in 2014? I looked down at my hands. Old scars, old oil stains, old stories. I signed. My voice cracked because I trusted my son. Mark didn't flinch, didn't soften his tone, didn't coddle me. He said the one sentence only a true friend or a true lawyer would dare say, trust without verification is the most expensive mistake a man can make. The sentence hit the ground like a loose bolt falling from a garage ceiling, small but deadly if it lands in the wrong place. I stood and walked to the window. Franklin's March air was cold, but not as cold as the truth settling in my chest. Outside, old cars sat quietly under the afternoon sun like aging soldiers waiting for someone to bring them back to life. I took a long breath, no trembling, no anger, just clarity, clean and sharp like a newly forged wrench. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I'm not here to punish anyone. All I want is to restart the truth. The same way I restart an old engine piece by piece, sound by sound. No rush, but no hesitation. I turned back to Mark. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. Respect. Where do we start? I asked. Mark closed the folder and answered with the precision of a mechanic snapping shut a toolbox. "We start with everything they tried to hide." I nodded. Sometimes a man's new life starts with a single sentence. "There are pains that don't come from shouting, not from fists, not from the long arguments that drain a home dry. Some pains hide in the smallest, quietest things. Things you once walked past without noticing: a torn photograph, an old cloth, a handwriting you thought you'd never see again." April of 2024 was when I went back to Morrison Classic Motors to clean out the old garage. And it was there, between the smell of rust and the dusty afternoon light, that I realized Grace had seen the truth long before I ever dared to face it. The garage where time never moved. My garage sits at the end of a narrow road in West Nashville. The old roll-up door screeched like metal in pain when I pulled it open. The smell of engine oil mixed with old pine wood rushed out at me like a memory I didn't know I missed. Inside, dust covered everything: the workbench, the wrench set, and the old AM radio that used to play Johnny Cash for half my life. I stepped inside my boots, leaving prints on the dust like footprints on a forgotten part of myself. Eleanor stood beside me, hands in her coat pockets. She didn't speak. She knew garages are places where men don't need comfort, only silence so they can face who they really are. "Jack," she said quietly, "just work, like you always do. And if you find something, call me." I nodded, and I started from the left corner where Grace used to sit on that wooden chair reading while I worked on engines. I opened the old Snap-on toolbox drawer, the very first thing Grace and I saved up for. Under a pile of oil rags, I found something thin, as fragile as the turn of a page, a worn yellow envelope. My heart clenched. Grace's handwriting. A small line. "To Jack. Not sent." My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper written in black ink. "If one day Ryan loses his way, don't hate him. Remind him with the sound of your hammer." I sank down onto the old metal stool. The garage grew so quiet I could hear the wind touching the tin roof. Grace had always seen the things I refused to see. I loved my son so much I believed that love could pull him away from any mistake. But Grace knew one day someone would lead him astray. Someone would manipulate him. Someone would erase the sound of my hammer from his memory. I couldn't read another word. I set the letter on my knee and buried my face in my hands. Eleanor walked over. She didn't say a single thing, just placed a steady hand on my shoulder. Sometimes truth doesn't kill you with a punch. It kills you with a line written by someone who's been dead for over a decade. Emily's discovery. A child's attempt to glue a family back together. Later that afternoon, a car pulled up outside the garage. Emily stepped out, my 12-year-old granddaughter holding her backpack, her face pale with worry. "Grandpa," she whispered. "My mom didn't want me to come, but I wanted to check if you're okay." I forced a smile. "I'm always okay when you're here." She wandered toward the old family storage box in the back corner while I fixed a shelf. A few minutes later, she called out, "Grandpa, look at this." I turned around. She was holding a photo. Our family photo. 2006. Me, Grace, and teenage Ryan. The picture was torn clean in half, the rip running exactly between Ryan and me. But what broke me most was what Emily had done to it. She had taped it back together, piece by piece, carefully, tenderly, as if trying to hold the family together with her own small hands. "I found it in a box in our basement," she said quietly. "Mom ripped it and threw it away. I thought you should have it." I couldn't speak. I just pulled her into my arms. In that moment, I realized it wasn't my family that collapsed. I had let it collapse without even seeing it. The hospital records. The warning Grace left behind. When Emily stepped outside to play with the stray cat behind the garage, Eleanor called me into the small office and back. "Jack." She held out a green medical file. "I found this from Vanderbilt Hospital. Grace's official records." I opened it. Pages and pages of notes. But there was one sentence underlined in red, not by Grace, but by her doctor. Patient expresses fear that her son will be financially manipulated by his future wife. I froze. Grace had known. All the way back in 2013, she had sensed it, feared it, tried to warn us. She had seen the danger long before I even looked in that direction. She told me once, Eleanor whispered. Grace said, "If she were gone, someone had to watch over you." I looked down at the pages in my hands. And suddenly every piece of the puzzle. Christmas night, Ryan's scream, the 2019 loan, the forged POA in 2014, the erased ownership, the betrayal. All of it came together into one single painful picture, a picture Grace had already seen 10 years earlier, and I, the man who thought himself strong, had been the blindest of all. The garage door swung open and sunlight poured across my face, making the tears on my cheeks shine like wet metal. I'm not a man who cries, not when Grace died, not when Ryan drove me out of my own home, but that afternoon, I cried, heavy metallic tears, because in that moment I understood Grace wasn't just my wife, she was the wisest part of me, my eyes, my compass, my conscience, the warning I ignored for a decade. I closed my hand around her letter, and for the first time in more than 10 years, I could feel Grace standing behind me again, not to comfort me, but to push me forward. There are truths that don't hide in what was covered up, but in what was never meant to be found. Sometimes the collapse of an entire family doesn't start with shouting or a slammed door or a marriage falling apart. Sometimes it begins with a misdirected email, a transaction accidentally logged, a bank statement someone forgot to delete. Late April of 2024. That's exactly how my world began to crack open. The office where truth was being hunted down. Mark Weston's office hadn't changed. Still small, still tidy, still unimpressive from the outside. But his desk, it was buried under documents. Not the messy chaos of a careless man, but the organized chaos of someone hunting a predator. Jack Mark said, pulling out a chair, "You might want to brace yourself." I sat. Eleanor stood behind me, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen ahead. Mark opened his laptop. "I've been tracing financial activity inside Morrison Auto Group over the last 4 years," he said. "And I found this." He tapped a key. The screen filled with numbers. Transfer $280,000 from Marketing Discretionary Fund to S. Morrison Temp Co. My breath caught in my throat. Eleanor whispered, "Oh my God." "And here's part 2, Mark said, clicking again. Transfer $280,000 from S. Morrison to Cole Benson, Bank of Miami, memo, property closing, Unit 38D. I stared at the words like they were carved into steel. A condo in Miami, purchased with company funds, and transferred to not her husband, not her family, not a trust, but to Cole Benson, a personal trainer who'd shown up at a few corporate events and then vanished. It didn't take much imagination to figure out what they were to each other. She made the transfer right after taking the fraudulent loan in your name," Mark added. "And she hid it under the marketing budget, marketing for what I asked," with a bitter laugh. Mark answered coldly, "Marketing for her private life." The email that should have never been written. Mark switched to another tab. "And now the part I really don't want you to see. But you need to." An email window opened, from samantha.morrison@maygroup.com. to Dr. Harold Riley, clinical psychologist. Subject: cognitive decline documentation. The message read, "If an elderly person refuses cognitive testing, is there any way to document signs of mild impairment? I need records to protect our family from my father-in-law's impulsive decisions." A hollow feeling spread through my chest. What did she want? To strip me of my voice, to legally declare me incompetent, to make every forged signature, every stolen dollar, every illegal loan look like something I agreed to. Because I didn't know what I was doing. Eleanor placed a hand on my shoulder. "Jack," she whispered, "she wasn't trying to push you out of the house." She tightened her grip. She wanted to silence you. Permanently. My vision blurred. Not because I couldn't read the words, but because my heart was shaking in a way no 66-year-old man ever admits to. Eleanor's move. A quiet power play. Before I could catch my breath, Eleanor stepped forward and placed a folder on Mark's desk. "My turn," she said. I looked over. Her voice was steady, too steady. "I bought some of the corporate debt tied to Morrison Auto Group," she said. $450,000 worth. I blinked at her. "Why would you do that?" She shrugged lightly, as if buying nearly $500,000 of distressed debt was something people did on a Tuesday. Because if another hedge fund got it, they'd force the company into bankruptcy to recover losses. But She looked straight into my eyes. "I'm not going to let Samantha destroy Grace's legacy," Mark added. When Eleanor bought that debt, she legally gained access to the company's deeper financial reports. No one suspects a thing Heritage Restorations invests in distressed assets all the time. I stared at Eleanor. The same girl who once shared a warm Coke with me in a boiling hot garage back in 1982 was now standing behind me in a war I hadn't even had the strength to start. "Eleanor," I said quietly, "you didn't have to do this." She answered instantly. "I made Grace a promise. If she ever left this world, I'd look after you." My chest tightened. The 10-year blueprint of betrayal. Mark gathered the documents into a neat stack, then laid them out like the pieces of a courtroom exhibit. "Let me summarize this for you, Jack," he said. One by one, he tapped each item. 1. Samantha took Grace's medical file in 2014, created a forged POA. 2. Used forged POA, opened a 2019 mortgage under your name. 3. Lowballed your house appraisal, made the mortgage easier to approve. 4. Embezzled company funds, transferred to her lover's condo in Miami. 5. Prepared cognitive decline reports to legally silence you. 6. Prepared IPO documents to erase your name permanently from the founding shares. I braced myself on the desk, not because I couldn't believe she did it, but because she did it for 10 years. And I never saw a thing. Eleanor crossed her arms, standing tall. Light from the window cut across her face like the blade of a saw. "Jack," she said, "justice doesn't come with sirens and flashing lights." I looked up. It starts like an old engine, quiet, slow, warming up before it roars. I took a long breath. My mind felt heavy as iron, but somewhere inside, a small point of light glowed. Like the very first spark in a combustion chamber, a tiny tick that can bring an entire engine roaring to life. "They think I'm old," I whispered. "A feeble man, easy to control, easy to silence." I stood up. For the first time in years, my legs felt steady as steel bolted to concrete. I looked at Mark, then at Eleanor. And I said, "All right, let's restart the truth. There are invitations that aren't meant for forgiveness, not for peace, not for healing. Some invitations exist for only one reason: to see just how far an old man will bow." In May of 2024, I received one of those invitations from Ryan. 4 words, "Dad, come over. Let's talk as a family." I heard his voice, shaky, hopeful, unsure, but underneath it, like a cold undercurrent, I heard her voice. Samantha, sharp, calculated, a woman whose smile never reached her eyes. A family dinner, I knew exactly what that meant. A minefield covered with a tablecloth. A house with no soul. Ryan's home in Brentwood was spotless, modern, and expensive, but soulless. Samantha had picked everything: the cold-colored walls, the pale gold lights, the furniture that looked like it had never been touched. There were no family photos, no traces of Grace, nothing of me. The past had been erased intentionally. Ryan opened the door, forcing a smile. "Dad, you made it." I nodded. I used to see the future in those eyes. Now I saw a man held hostage by the fear of losing his wife. Samantha stepped out from the kitchen carrying a tray of meat. "Well, Jack," she said, honey dripping from her voice like poison. "Let's sit down, shall we?" I placed a brown envelope beside my plate. She glanced at it fast enough to notice, slow enough to pretend she wasn't rattled. Ryan pulled out a chair. His hand trembled. I wondered how much of this man was truly Ryan, and how much was Samantha's influence wearing his skin. Samantha poured wine. "We're here to put misunderstandings behind us," she said, "to clear up the confusion you caused." I raised one eyebrow. "Confusion?" "Yes," she reclined in her seat. "You're old, Jack. Everyone sees it. You forget things. Doctors mentioned early signs of mild cognitive decline. No one is going to believe a confused old man." Ryan kept his eyes down. He couldn't look at me. That sentence wasn't meant to insult me, it was meant to break me. I opened the envelope. Papers slid across the table. The $280,000 transfer, her email to the psychologist, the forged POA, the Miami condo paperwork, hospital footage of her taking Grace's file in 2014. Silence swallowed the room. Even the ticking clock seemed to hold its breath. Samantha gave a soft, mocking laugh, the laugh of someone who still thinks she's winning. "You think anyone will believe this?" she said. "Look at you. Old, forgetful. People will think you're imagining things. And we will say you're trying to sabotage your son's future." I leaned back. "Samantha," I said slowly, You can manipulate many things, but not everyone. For the first time, she blinked just once, but I saw the crack. I turned to Ryan. What do you think, son? Ryan swallowed hard. Dad, I just want peace. I locked eyes with him. Peace doesn't come from hiding the truth. It never has. Then a small sound from the doorway. A small figure peeked in. Emily! What are you doing here? Samantha snapped. But the child didn't look at her. She held a red USB stick, gripping it so tight her knuckles turned white. Grandpa, she whispered, I have something for you. I bent down. Where did you get this? I asked gently. Emily's eyes flicked toward her mother, a glance filled with fear awareness and something far older than 12 years. I found it in the file cabinet in our basement, she said softly. I thought you needed it. Samantha shot up from her chair. Emily, give it to me. But it was too late. I plugged the USB into the tablet Mark had given me. One single audio file. I pressed play. Samantha's voice filled the room. If he remembers nothing, we control everything. Then the CFO's voice, and if he does remember, and Samantha again, cold, deliberate, deadly, then I'll prove he's not mentally competent to have a say. The room froze. Samantha's face drained of color. Ryan stared at her. Really stared, as if seeing his wife for the very first time. I looked at Emily. Her small hand gripped mine beneath the table, fingers trembling, knuckles white. She whispered, I believe you, Grandpa. And in that instant, everything shifted. Not because of the evidence, not because of the recordings, but because of the look in a child's eyes, a child who had watched everything fall apart, yet still chose to piece it back together. I stood. Every joint in my body felt like iron, but my heart felt lighter than it had in years. I placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. Thank you, I said softly. You just did what none of the adults in this house had the courage to do. Ryan looked up at me, the same eyes that once hugged my neck from the back seat of a Mustang. Now they belonged to a man standing at the edge of a cliff, finally seeing the drop. Dad, he whispered. I didn't know. I held his gaze. Not knowing is not the same as not wanting to know. Samantha breathed sharply, desperate to regain control. You can't use this USB in court. It's... A voice cut through the doorway. Eleanor. I hadn't even heard her arrive. Don't lecture me about the law. Samantha, she said, her tone ice cold. This evidence will be handled properly. Samantha stepped back, one pace, the first retreat I had ever seen from her. Ryan collapsed into his chair, hands shaking. Emily, small, fragile, brave, stood like the only pillar left holding the house upright. And I understood something with perfect clarity. I was no longer fighting alone. They think I'm an old, outdated machine, I thought. But they forget when old engines roar back to life. They make a sound no new engine can match. When a family fractures, the cracking sound never comes from the outside. It comes from deep within, from the place where people hide. Secrets bury guilt and fear, only one thing: exposure. By June of 2024, Samantha began hearing that crack. And instead of stopping, she pushed harder. The restraining order, her desperate first strike. I was sitting in Mark's office when my phone buzzed. You're being sued. The way Mark said it, flat heavy, felt like someone had dropped a block of molten iron onto the desk. Samantha filed an ex parte restraining order, Mark said. She claims you're a danger to the family, showing signs of cognitive decline, and that you threatened her. I exhaled slowly. She used the fake psych records, didn't she? Oh, she used more than that. Mark turned his screen toward me. She submitted a psych evaluation draft written by a doctor who has never even met you. A psychological assessment. About me. Written by someone who never looked me in the eyes. Paid for by Samantha. Approved temporarily by an overworked legal system. Mark closed the laptop gently. Don't worry, he said. We're countering immediately. The hearing when the video destroyed her story. The hearing was quick, 20 minutes at most. Samantha walked in with red, puffy eyes like she'd cried all night. But I knew the truth. It was perfect makeup. Your Honor, She began trembling. My father-in-law flipped the dinner table, yelled, and manipulated my husband emotionally. "He's unstable." Mark stood. "To avoid wasting the court's time, we'd like to play video footage from the restaurant that night." The judge nodded. The screen lit up. There I was, sitting quietly, not raising my voice once. Then Samantha leaning forward, pointing aggressively, her voice sharp like broken glass. No yelling from me, no threats, no confused old man, just truth. Samantha's face drained of color. Her lawyer lowered his head. The judge didn't hesitate. "Ms. Morrison, your petition is denied, and the court will treat this as an attempt at false reporting." The first crack in Samantha's mask. I thought the storm might calm after that. I was wrong. The breaking news betrayal. Triggered by betrayal. The next morning, Mark's phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Jack, it's big." He sent me a link. Nashville Ledger. Breaking news fraud. Behind Morrison Auto IPO. My hands went cold. Who leaked it? Not an employee, not a hacker, not Eleanor. It was Cole Benson, the personal trainer, the man who received $280,000 from Samantha, the man living in the Miami condo she bought. In his email to the reporter, he wrote, "She promised she'd protect me. Then when things got messy, she ghosted me. I don't protect anyone who doesn't protect me. A betrayal. To punish a betrayal." The article listed everything: the forged POA, the 2019 mortgage fraud, the Miami condo, the misused marketing funds, the plan to erase my name from the IPO, the recorded meeting where she plotted to declare me incompetent. I read each line feeling like I was reading an indictment carved into stone. The Morrison name, the legacy I built with grace, was now smeared across the news like an oil spill, the meltdown Ryan breaks in front of his own company. Later that day, I returned to my old garage. The Morrison Auto Group headquarters was next door. That's when I heard shouting. Ryan's shouting. I walked toward the glass doors. Papers littered the floor around him, employees frozen like statues. "Dad ruined my life," Ryan screamed. Phones lifted. Cameras clicked. Whispers buzzed like a hive. I stepped inside. No Ryan. He spun around, eyes bloodshot. "Dad, if you hadn't dug up the past, the IPO would have closed. I cut him off quietly. "Ryan, you destroyed your own life when you let someone borrow my honor to take out debt." He froze, because truth hurts most when it's correct. Then Samantha stormed in, heels clacking like gunshots. "Ryan," she shouted, "don't listen to him. He's trying to drag you down with him." She grabbed Ryan's arm. He shoved her away. The first time I had ever seen him push her. Samantha lost control. She slapped him, hard. The sound cracked through the lobby like metal slammed against concrete. Employees gasped. Phones recorded from every angle. One recording caught the perfect angle, the kind of shot that goes viral instantly. Samantha turned toward me, ready to scream, but the whispering had already started. God, I always knew something was off. If this hits TikTok, it's over. Oh, this is going viral for sure. And it did. The clip that burned their reputation down: CEO's wife slaps him. During IPO meltdown, 4.2 million views in 36 hours, 12,000 comments, 24,000 shares, a Reddit thread with 8,000 upvotes, hashtag Morrison scandal trending locally, screenshots everywhere, Ryan holding his cheek, Samantha mid-face twisted in rage, me standing behind them, calm, silent, watching. Users captioned the moment the father saw it all before we did. He's the soul of the Morrison legacy. One slap ended the entire IPO. I didn't want humiliation. I didn't want my family turned into a meme. But I couldn't control the world. I could only control the truth. Truth isn't a blade. It's light. And once it's lit, it doesn't care who catches fire. When truth begins to surface, it never rises alone. It drags memories with it. It drags old friends back into the light. It drags confessions you never thought you'd hear in your lifetime. By the summer of 2024, I finally understood something simple. Justice doesn't come from the courtroom. Justice comes from people. People brave enough to stand up before the court doors even open. July heat in Nashville can melt a man's patience. The asphalt shimmered like thin smoke rising from the earth as I pushed open the door of the Veterans Mechanics Club. It's not a fancy place, not modern, just a small sanctuary for old mechanics and old soldiers who've been elbow-deep in engines since the 70s and 80s. License plates from long-dead cars hung on the walls, each one a memory, each one a life story. Tom Riley gray hair, oil-stained beard, the The friend who restored 47 classic cars with me over 40 years stepped out and embraced me the way a man hugs a brother returning from a battlefield. Jack. His voice was gravel-worn but warm. "Tom," I said quietly, "I need your help." "You don't need to say a word," he replied. "I already know." He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You're not fighting this alone." Tom led me into the back room, a small space with a cracked wooden table and a ceiling fan that clicked with every turn. On the table sat an old safe. "Grace gave me this in 2014, Tom said. "She told me, if Jack ever needs it, put it in his hands." My chest tightened. Tom unlocked the safe. A sharp metallic tack echoed through the room, the sound of truth knocking on the door. Inside was a single envelope. White, a little worn at the edges. Tom placed it in my hands as if handing over something sacred. The front read POA, original, confidential. I opened it, and there it was, my signature. Grace's signature. The real power of attorney. The one we signed at the hospital in 2014. No financial clauses, no ownership clauses, no loan authorization, no rights for anyone to use my name for debt, just a pure medical POA, the one we agreed on for Grace's treatment. What Samantha used was something else entirely. A weapon. A forgery. Tom slid a photocopy of Samantha's fake POA next to the real one. "I compared them," he said quietly. "Samantha's version is fake. The signature was overlaid with vector tools." My hands trembled. Tom rested his heavy palm on my shoulder and said a sentence I will remember until the day I die. "Grace knew. She knew Samantha would try to take your family. That's why she trusted me with the real document. She believed in you. But she believed in my caution more." I bowed my head. A man can be as strong as steel, but in front of a dead woman's faith, he becomes fragile. Tom called someone in. Ben Hayes entered nervously, a young mechanic 20 years my junior. He worked in my garage for 6 years. He couldn't look me in the eye. "Jack," he whispered, voice shaking, I'm sorry for what I asked cold." Ben handed me a small envelope. "Ryan paid me $5,000 to access your old login credentials." The room fell silent. "Why?" I repeated. Ben swallowed hard. "He told me you were transferring stock to him. I needed money for my mother's treatment. I thought it was just paperwork." Tom growled. "Paperwork. A family almost blew apart because of your paperwork." Ben broke into tears. "I know. When Cole leaked the emails, I knew I had to come clean. Samantha had me forward the fake POA scans to someone named Vance, the interim CFO. Vance, the same name Mark highlighted in red on the financial web chart." Ben trembled. "I was a coward, Jack. But I'm telling the truth now. I didn't forgive him. But I understood." Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from people drowning in their own desperation. The next day, Mark called Eleanor and me to the bank. A young banker named Harley Daniels waited nervously. He kept glancing over his shoulder as if someone might be watching. "Mr. Morrison," he whispered, "I'm not supposed to speak on this, but you need to know." He slid a thin stack of papers toward us. In 2019, a woman named Samantha Morrison brought in a financial durable POA to open a loan in your name. My jaw clenched. "I thought the paperwork looked off," Harley continued. "The signature was too clean, too perfect. I flagged it to my supervisor." And Mark asked. A week later, Harley said bitterly, "I was transferred to another branch. Randomly." He shook his head. "No one reassigns staff over questioning a legal document unless someone powerful wants them out of the way." "Samantha," Eleanor whispered. "That's the thread we needed." Mark stood, voice sharp. "So now we have the real POA from Grace, the forged POA from Samantha, a bank witness, a mechanic confessing he sold login access, the audio recording of Samantha plotting incompetency claims, the Miami condo transaction, the misused marketing funds." I exhaled. "That enough?" Mark smiled faintly. "Jack, it's enough to collapse an IPO." That afternoon, Eleanor did something I didn't see coming. She drove alone to the Tennessee State Courthouse. And she filed everything. Hundreds of pages. The real POA, the fake POA, the recordings, the bank logs, the signed confessions, the emails, the Miami transfer, the marketing misuse. The clerk looked up and asked, "Name of the submitting party." Eleanor didn't even hesitate. E. Brooks. Not CEO, not friend, not partner in battle, just a single initial. But that initial carried a decade of loyalty to Grace and a promise to me. That night I took the '67 Mustang out of the garage for the first time in months. The engine warmed beneath me, steady and alive. The wind hit my face like something waking me up after a long sleep. The highway opened before me, and in a low, steady voice, one that felt older, wiser, heavier, I heard myself say, "Justice doesn't walk alone. It waits for the person who's brave enough to sign their name." I had Tom. I had Ben. I had Emily. I had Mark. I had Harley. I had Eleanor. And I had Grace, who locked the real POA away 10 years before I ever knew I'd need it. I wasn't fighting alone anymore, and for the first time in years, I saw a light ahead that wasn't fading. There are days in a man's life when he stands at an invisible crossroads, days when every secret is dragged into the light, every lie is ripped open, and the truth, no matter how painful, stands tall like a sheet of stainless steel. October 2024 was one of those days. I walked into the Tennessee Civil Court, not to win, not to punish, but to restore the honor of Grace and my own. The courtroom, cold light and sharp edges. Nashville that morning was cold and metallic. The October sunlight spilled through the courthouse windows like a harsh silver wash across the floors. I stepped into the courtroom. Mark stood beside me, a stack of documents piled high like concrete bricks. Eleanor sat behind us, hands clasped, eyes sharp and unblinking. Ryan entered first, dressed neatly but with dark circles under his eyes from nights that had clearly bled into one another. He didn't look at me. Then Samantha walked in, composed, polished, blazer white as bone, hair pulled back tight. Her heels struck the floor like the rhythm of arrogance. But I saw what others didn't fear. It lived beneath the makeup, behind her raised chin, and deep inside the eyes that refused to turn toward me. The evidence table becomes a battlefield. The judge entered. The trial began. Mark stood, voice calm and precise. "Your Honor, today we present evidence of forged documents, financial fraud, and abuse of power of attorney." He opened the first binder. 1. The forged 2014 financial durable POA created with vector overlay techniques. My scanned signature manipulated timestamps. 2. The unauthorized $250,000 loan 2019 my house used as collateral validated by a fake home improvement authorization. 3. The $280,000 transfer marketing funds, Samantha, Cole Benson. Memo, property closing, Unit 38D. 4. The fraudulent home devaluation request emailed from Samantha's account. 5. The recording. "If he doesn't remember anything, we control everything." Samantha's hands tightened in her lap until her knuckles turned white. Mark paused. A silence that weighed as much as the room. The video that shattered the mask. "Your Honor, Mark said we now present the most decisive evidence." He signaled the technician. A large screen flickered to life. Black and white footage, grainy old security cam quality, but clear enough. A woman hunched, masked, wearing a knit cap, carrying a blue file, the medical file of Grace, walking out of the hospital records room in 2014. Mark zoomed in. The profile appeared. Samantha. Not deniable. Not arguable. Not distortable. Silence swallowed the courtroom whole. Even the judge leaned forward. Samantha's lips trembled. Her lawyer dropped his pen. For a moment, I felt nothing. Just the weight of 10 years finally landing on solid ground. Grace's voice. The one no enemy could defeat. Mark reached into his bag and pulled out an old CD. "Your Honor," he said softly, "this evidence is not to indict the defendant, but to show the character of my client." He placed the disc into the player. A soft static hiss filled the air. Then Grace's voice, warm, soft, a little tired, but steady as the woman I loved. "Ryan, if you ever lose your way, listen to your father's hammer. Every strike is a reminder that honor never retires." My head bowed. Ryan covered his face with both hands, his shoulders shaking. Samantha stared ahead, jaw clenched. She couldn't fight a dead woman's voice. No one can. Suddenly, Ryan stood. "Stop!" he shouted, voice cracking. Everyone turned. I didn't know," he said, trembling. "I knew she was strong-willed, but I didn't think she would do this." He looked at Samantha, eyes wide with disbelief and betrayal. "You lied to me," Ryan whispered. "Everything you told me, every paper I signed, it was all a lie." Samantha shot up, screaming, "Ryan, sit down!" But he didn't even hear her. He turned toward me, and for the first time in years I saw the little boy who used to sit on the back of my Mustang, arms wrapped around my neck. "Dad," his voice broke. "I'm sorry. I didn't speak. I just nodded. A single apology can't rewrite a decade, but it can open the door to the truth." Judge Walters adjusted his glasses, eyes fixed on Samantha. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds Samantha Morrison guilty of document forgery, abuse of power of attorney, fraud, and civil transactions. He continued, sentence 12 months probation, 300 hours of community service at the Nashville Auto Recovery Center, the very garage I created for community outreach. Samantha froze. Community service in a grease-stained garage was a punishment sharper than prison for a woman built on pride. Then the judge turned to Ryan Morrison. "You are ordered to repay $1.2 million in damages and are removed from your role as CEO pending a full restructuring." Ryan lowered his head. No objections, no excuses, just the collapse of the life Samantha built on lies. After the storm in the hand that didn't let go. As the courtroom cleared, the golden light of sunset spilled across the floor. I stood alone in the aisle, tired but lighter than I'd felt in years. Eleanor walked up beside me. She didn't give a speech, didn't congratulate me. She simply took my hand, her grip cold but firm, like steel that's been chilled but never broken. She whispered, "Grace won today. And she won with you." Just one sentence. But in it, I heard Grace's breath, her faith, her strength. I lifted my eyes to the window, watched the sky burn with evening gold, and whispered, "We did it, Grace." Some collapses arrive with an explosion. Others happen in silence, the way metal rusts from the inside out. And one gentle touch is all it takes for everything to fall apart. By the end of 2024, the Morrison family fractured in that silent way, not with shouting, not with court rulings, but with emptiness. The slow crumbling. After the October trial, Ryan was no longer CEO. He was forced to sell 30% of his shares to cover the $1.2 million judgment. The office building where he once walked tall became the place he avoided, like a man steering clear of his own reflection. Employees stared at him with a mix of pity and suspicion. The name Morrison Auto Group, once a symbol of my pride, was now tied to his youthfulness, his fear, and his blind loyalty to the wrong person. Mark once told me fraud never dies because of rumors. It dies because of truth. And truth had finally hit Ryan like a wrench to the ribs. In November, Samantha began her court-ordered community service at the Nashville Auto Recovery Center, the very program I founded in 1998 to teach underprivileged teenagers how to rebuild engines. Karma doesn't have to be fast. Karma only has to be accurate. I watched through the shop's glass window. She was scrubbing engine grease from under an old pickup blue work shirt smeared in oil. A few young mechanics filmed discreetly, not mocking her, but stunned that the woman who once wore white blazers and walked red carpets at company events was now wiping down suspension parts like a first-week apprentice. She looked up and saw me. Her eyes, sharp but hollow, met mine. I didn't stop walking. I wasn't there to gloat. I wasn't there to punish her. I was there to witness the truth, placing her exactly where she had placed others. On November 14, 2024, a letter arrived from the bank. Morrison Classic Motors is officially reinstated under the name Jack Morrison. I stood alone in the garage as sunlight broke through the old windows, dust floating in the beams like slow-falling snow. The tools on the walls were still rusted at the edges, but somehow the air felt warmer. Eleanor stood beside me, her voice quiet, relieved. "I never thought I'd see this place alive again," she said. Neither did I. And somewhere inside me, I heard Grace's voice. Honor never retires. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. The night the engine should never have run, December 27th, 2024. Cold rain. Nashville drenched in mist and winter wind. I drove the Mustang to the garage around 11 p.m., planning to finish a few repairs before reopening. But when I arrived, I noticed something wrong. A faint glow beneath the garage door. My garage lights never turned on by themselves. My heart skipped. I walked closer, and then I heard it, the low, steady growl of an engine running in a sealed room. A running engine, closed doors, no ventilation, carbon monoxide, a silent executioner. I shoved the door open. The scene hit me like a blade of ice. The Camaro. Ryan's Camaro. Engine running. White haze drifting through the air like an invisible shroud. Ryan slumped sideways in the driver's seat, a whiskey bottle on the floor, his face flushed from alcohol but turning blue around the lips. "Oh God," I breathed. This wasn't a planned suicide. This was the desperate kind, the kind men fall into when they've run out of places to stand. But CO doesn't care about intention. It kills just the same. I ran to him, pulled open the door. The fumes hit my face like a burning slap. "Ryan," I yelled. His eyes fluttered open, fogged, unfocused. "Dad." His voice was weak, cracking apart in midair. I grabbed him by the shoulders. His body felt like dead weight. I dragged him out of the car, gasping through the fumes, through the garage doors open, and kicked on the industrial fan. He collapsed onto the concrete floor, breathing in ragged, failing gulps. Then I heard footsteps. I turned. Samantha was standing in the doorway, arms crossed around herself, face pale as sheet metal. "How long have you been standing there?" I asked. She swallowed hard. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. My voice cut through the air like steel. "Why didn't you call 911? Tears streaked down her face, but they weren't remorse. They were fear. Fear of consequences, fear of losing control. I didn't know what to do. No, she didn't love him enough to move her feet. If I had been 10 minutes later, my son would have died in the same garage where I once taught him how to recognize the sound of a healthy engine. And Samantha would have just watched the way a person watches a fire they're too tired to put out. I ignored her and knelt beside my son. Ryan blinked up at me, eyes bloodshot and desperate. "Dad." His voice was raw, a broken piece of metal scraping against stone. "You saved me. Even after everything I did to you," I cupped the side of his face, the same cheek Samantha slapped back in June. "Ryan," I said softly, "not because you deserve it, but because you're still my son." Something inside him cracked. Ryan cried, not loudly, not messily, just soft, trembling tears dripping onto his shirt like drops of warm oil. I let her control everything. I lost myself, and I made you lose everything. I shook my head. Not everything. I still have you. That moment in the dim garage, CO fumes still lingering in the cold air, lights flickering overhead, we sat on the dusty concrete like two men trying to salvage what little was left. No judge, no jury, no lawyers, no evidence. Just a father and a broken son using the last pieces of their hearts to hold back the collapse. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is choosing not to let pain devour the future. And for the first time in years, as Ryan leaned into me crying like the boy he once was, I felt my son truly come back. Some apologies are spoken face to face, but some can only be written to the dead. And sometimes those words sealed away for years are the very thing that guides the living back into the light. At the beginning of 2025, I witnessed something I never thought I would see again. My son becoming the man Grace always hoped he'd be. Ryan finds the letter buried for 10 years. One January morning, while I was sorting old metal shelves in the garage, Ryan walked in. "Dad." His voice was still rough from months of exhaustion. "I found this." He handed me a small yellowed envelope. The edges were frayed. The ink was fading. Across the front, in a younger, clumsy handwriting, "For Mom, 2015. I looked at Ryan. He swallowed hard. "I wrote it when I turned 30, right before I married Samantha." I opened the envelope. Inside was the letter Ryan never sent Grace the same year he told me he didn't believe in sentimental things. But the words said otherwise. I began reading and Ryan recited softly along with me. Mom, I'm afraid of losing her, but I'm even more afraid of becoming the kind of man who disappoints Dad. I don't want to choose wrong. I don't want to shame you. I don't want to hurt him. I had to stop reading. My chest tightened. I held that letter as if it were a fragile piece of Ryan's younger self. Some words lose their meaning over time, but others only find their meaning when read at the right moment. Ryan whispered, I didn't listen to her. I didn't listen to you. I let someone else turn me into something I wasn't. I looked at him. No arrogance, no pride, only a man trying to claw his way back from the rubble he created. Ryan's public confession. A week later, Ryan stood in the doorway of the garage. Dad, I want you to read this before I publish it. He handed me his laptop. On the screen was a draft for the Nashville Chronicle. My father built engines and he built me. I read every word, and his voice echoed in my mind like a steady, low voiceover. It took me years to understand that my father didn't just fix cars. He fixed the broken parts of me, the parts I shattered with pride, fear, and the need to be loved by the wrong person. I thought power defined a man. But now I know. Honor is what keeps a man standing. My father didn't abandon me when I destroyed everything. He saved me even when I didn't save him. And then the line that broke something open inside me. He didn't just build engines. He built my heart. I closed the laptop and looked at him. You're sure you want this out there? I asked. He nodded, a steady, grown man kind of nod. I can't change the past, but I can change how I walk forward. Emily chooses the Morrison legacy. One February afternoon, Emily, my granddaughter, came to the garage. She wore safety goggles, a backpack, and her hair tied high. Grandpa, she said, I want to learn how to fix cars. I paused. You're sure? Not everyone chooses this road. She smiled a smile so much like Grace's that it made the air leave my lungs. I want to keep the Morrison name the right way, not the way my mom twisted it, but the way Grandma described it. Something inside me tightened. And where do you want to start? I asked. She lifted a tiny wrench from the tool wall. With the smallest wrench, Emily said. Just like Dad once did. Ryan stood behind her, eyes glistening. She's like her grandmother, I whispered. And thank God, Ryan said quietly. She's nothing like Samantha. Restarting the Mustang. Restarting the family, March 2025. I decided it was time to restart the 1967 Mustang, the car Grace and I restored together, the car Ryan held onto my shoulders in as a boy, the car that sat silent for 6 years after Grace died. It had become a symbol of grief, frozen under dust. Emily stood on my left, Ryan on my right. I handed Ryan the keys. You do it. His hands trembled slightly. He slid the key in, turned it gently. Click. The sound of metal engaging like a heart remembering how to beat again. He inhaled deeply and turned it further. The engine tried, strained, growled but didn't catch. My heart pounded. Emily put a hand on his shoulder. Try again, Dad. Ryan turned the key once more. The Mustang roared to life, deep, warm, full-bodied, like the long exhale of a woman we both loved returning home after too long. White exhaust drifted out the back. Sunlight hit the smoke and turned it into glowing mist. Ryan froze. No tears, no laughter, just a man witnessing a piece of his soul come back online. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Grace would be proud, I said softly, and so am I. Ryan leaned his head against my shoulder, something he hadn't done since he was 15. That moment. The Mustang's first heartbeat in 6 years, Emily at our side, Ryan and I standing together. It was no longer father and son. It was the Morrison family restarting its own engine. Sometimes the only thing left to do is restart your own heart. The garage glowed with the muted light of an old chapel smelling of oil and steel. And in the rhythm of that running engine, I heard Grace whisper, "You kept it, Jack. There are roads we spend a lifetime walking, only to find ourselves back at the very beginning, but this time with different feet and a heart no longer carrying the weight it once did." On November 12th, 2025, I stood inside the workshop at Heritage Restorations in Franklin, Tennessee, staring at the 1967 Mustang resting beneath the warm yellow lights, and I realized my life had turned a full, perfect circle. Jack. No longer the man stripped of his honor. On my workbench sat a small nameplate, Jack Morrison, Senior Technical Advisor. I ran a hand over the metal, feeling its cool surface. It wasn't about title or power or status. It was about recognition, the kind a man earns not in his prime, but after surviving everything meant to break him. Eleanor stood a few feet away, reviewing reports, eyes red from exhaustion. "Did you remember your medication?" I asked. She shot me a look. "I am not your patient." "And yet Grace asked me to look after you long before any of this," I replied, half teasing. For the first time in weeks, she laughed, that soft, weary laugh of someone finally coming up for air. Running Heritage Restorations had drained every ounce of her strength. When she collapsed back in August, I was the one who drove her to the hospital. And from that day on, I brewed her morning coffee, drove her home at night, checked her emails when stress blurred her vision. Some promises don't need to be spoken. They simply live inside the heart of the person who keeps them. Samantha, from pride to quiet silence. That afternoon, I drove the Mustang toward Nashville to check on a restoration project. As I passed the Nashville Auto Recovery Center, the same community garage I built in 1998 for at-risk youth, I slowed down. A group of volunteers in blue work shirts were bent under a truck wiping grease. And then I saw her. Samantha. No white blazer, no heels, no perfect makeup, just a woman in a faded blue uniform, hands stained with oil, face tired, scrubbing the undercarriage of a 2009 Chevy pickup. She didn't notice me at first. But then the Mustang's engine gave that unmistakable growl. Her head lifted, and our eyes met through a thin haze of dust. In that moment, there was no hatred, no victory, no revenge, no losing side. Just two lives that once crashed into each other and shattered, now standing on opposite sides of different roads. She dipped her head barely. Not an apology, not surrender, just acknowledgement, a quiet acceptance of truth. I returned the gesture, subtle enough that no one else would see. A punctuation mark at the end of a long, violent chapter. I pressed the accelerator. The Mustang answered with a low rumble and carried me forward. Ryan, finally standing on his own feet. When I arrived at Morrison Classic Motors, Ryan was standing at the tool shelf and Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, wrestling a stubborn oil filter off an old Civic. "Grandpa," she called. "If I get good at this, do you think I can work full-time next summer?" "That depends on how clean you keep that oil pan today," I said. Ryan laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard since before he fell to the concrete floor last year. "Dad," he said, "do you know what today is?" I looked at him. Of course. Today is the anniversary of the day Grace was discharged from the hospital 12 years ago. The day she said, "If I don't make it through this, you have to keep Ryan on the right path." Ryan lowered his head. "And I didn't stay on the right path." "No," I said softly. "You just wandered off for a few years. What matters is that you found your way back." Ryan blinked hard and nodded. "A man doesn't need to be perfect. He just needs to turn around before it's too late." That evening, I drove back to Franklin to take Eleanor to her follow-up appointment. Outside the clinic, under the glow of the neon lights, she said, "Jack, I never thought I'd say this, but thank you." "I only did what Grace would have wanted," I replied. She shook her head gently. "Not just for Grace. You saved Ryan. You saved Emily from a toxic house. You saved the garage you built with your bare hands." I had no words. She put a hand on my shoulder, firm, steady. "You think you lost so much. But the truth is, Jack, you got everything back in a better form." On my way home, I passed the community center again. Samantha was still working, wiping down a tire, her back slightly hunched. A streetlight glowed above her, casting a dim halo of gold. No one was coming to save her. No one was making excuses for her. No one was softening her fall. It wasn't punishment, it was truth. And truth sometimes is the fairest verdict of all. I whispered through my open window. Some people pay with money. Some pay with reputation. And some pay with the silence they once forced onto others. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. but for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I got back in the Mustang, turned the key, and the car rolled onto the Tennessee highway. The sunset burned red on the horizon. Golden streaks spilled across the hood like Grace's hand resting there smiling. Cold air rushed through the window, but inside me everything felt warm. Honor, I whispered, is not something others give you. It's something you choose to hold even when no one else believes in it. The Mustang roared forward into the long stretch of road, a road with no darkness chasing behind me, only light waiting ahead. If you've ever been betrayed, would you choose revenge, or would you choose to stand back up and hold on to your honor? Tell me your thoughts below. If this story touched something in you, take a moment to hit like. It tells YouTube that stories about courage, dignity, and second chances still matter. Leave a comment below. Have you ever lived through something like Jack did? Would you choose revenge or choose to rise? And if you know someone who might need this story today, someone who's hurting quietly, share this video with them. Sometimes one story at the right moment can keep a heart from breaking. And if you want to walk with me through more journeys of family truth and justice, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. We'll keep telling the stories life too often tries to hide.